Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Kent Sisco, author of Finding Rest. Kent, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Paul, for inviting me to come on the show. This is awesome.
All right, you ready?
Sure, shoot.
All right, let's get started. Question number 1. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Really simply, I think that the most important thing is to capture, organize, and revise your thoughts. That sounds like 3 things, actually. So, wait a minute. Capture, organize, revise, but it's really one thing. Develop your thoughts. I think that people have an incomplete understanding of the writing process, and the goal shouldn't be to have a daily word count goal or even a goal to complete a writing project per se. The goal should be to build a massive library of one's thoughts that you add to every day of your life, from which you draw on to complete all kinds of writing projects. And when you built a massive reservoir of your thoughts and you shake it up a bit, it becomes a tsunami of thoughts that will utterly destroy any writer's block that you have. It's really what thought leaders do, right? Mm-hmm. They develop their thoughts, repackage them, repurpose them in a variety of ways, and then they're able to do so because they poured into their library of thoughts a massive amount of energy, and it shows in how they deliver their message. It's actually, that's the point that makes us attracted to them, the power of the thoughts they convey. So there's no doubt about it. It really is the thought that counts. And what I mean by that is complete thoughts mean way more than just a stream of words. So I would say get used to writing down your thoughts every day, and at the moment they pop into your head, and get used to revising them and honing them and turning them into powerful sound bites. Because the sound bite is really what the rest of your thoughts in your book hang on. So really simply, create, capture, organize, revise your thoughts, essentially develop your thoughts. That's what I would say.
Okay. And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Self-publishing is actually pretty easy once you've assembled your writing. I think it's almost as easy as pushing a button. But what I see many people struggling with is pulling their thoughts together. That's the difficult part, and trying to make sense of it all, not only for your audience, but for yourself. That's a difficult thing to do, this whole idea of organizing ideas. Given the tools that we have to use today, organizing thoughts is pretty difficult. And I'd attribute that to Steve Jobs unwittingly sealed the fate of the word processor by turning the focus of word processing towards typesetting and away from a tool for thinking. There's so many problems with the word processor that we have to use coping mechanisms just to write. And just like I had said earlier in the earlier question, the word count goals are really just a coping mechanism. And another coping mechanism is the advice you get from writing mentors like, don't think, just write. But what I would suggest is write what you think, so because it's the thought that counts. And I guess when you capture and organize and rewrite your ideas, that's the point that makes it a little bit easier to get your ideas published. I don't know if that made sense, but that's kind of what I'm driving at.
No, it's all about the process. I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Question number 3. Please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that worked well.
I grew up in Japan from elementary school through my second year of university as a missionary kid, and my parents are pastors of a church in Tokyo, so I leveraged my family ties to sell copies of my book. My parents invited me to come speak at their church and about the subject that I wrote about in my book. And I started selling copies to interested parties that came to the event. And I had English versions and Japanese versions of the book. And I think it was within the first 4 times that I spoke that really began to drive the sales of my book. I had over 1,000 books printed and ended up selling all of them in Japan in less than 1 year at equivalent price of about $10 a copy. So since then, I've been invited to speak at a variety of places, and I just bring a couple boxes of books with me and sell them. I would say that if you want to make money selling books, the best way I know of is to do speaking engagements and sell copies of your book at the event. That's really what's been most successful for me.
Well, and that's a great answer. So essentially, what you're doing is you're buying the books in bulk, probably about $2 to $3 a copy, and then selling them for probably around $10. Correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that is a great tactic.
I've been making since the book has been written. I've been making about $5,000 to $7,000 a year. So it's not a lot, but it's something.
Well, and every bit helps, and especially when you're utilizing book signings doing that. I had Jason Chimera on the show. He's actually from Canada, and he was talking about how he was doing that for his book, Becca Told Me To, where he was doing book signings all over Canada. So it's definitely is a great tactic to utilize. And as you mentioned as well, for lead generation, one thing I've mentioned, one of my tactics is I will speak at leadership conferences for free, and typically I will give the seminar of that book. So if I do one of Positivity Attracts, Motivation 101, as we progress near the end of it, I'm asking, hey, does your campus or does your company bring in speakers? Great, come see me at the end. I'd like to give you an autographed paperback copy of the book, and we can show you how to bring in speakers. And just by doing that alone, you're giving away a $3 book potentially for a $3,000 speaking gig. So it's a great way to leverage that, and especially with the back end with speaking opportunities and also with book signings. So that's great tactics.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's really good.
So let's talk about your favorite book. What is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Wow. I do actually have a lot of favorites in many different subjects, but I guess in keeping with the subject we're on, my favorite book would be The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. It's the book that gives you steps in how to focus on your one thing, and in this case, it would be practical steps of writing your book. And the thing that I learned from the book, The One Thing, was that multitasking itself is a lie. You really need to have a singleness of focus and barricade yourself from the distractions that assault us every day when you're in what I call the rewriting stage. And I'm all for capturing ideas and organizing them throughout the day. But when I want to pull the ideas together and rewrite them, I really need to have, or not have, I guess, those the usual distractions around me, those things that interfere with my ability to singly focus. Those could be phone calls, emails, social media, other people in the office wanting my time, etc. And so what I've learned to do is set aside time specifically for rewriting, and I've even gone to the point where I've asked people to not disturb me during that time. It generally helps to actually when you ask people not to disturb you to give them the reason why, and because people are curious, right? And it inspires them when they know what you're doing, and then they might do the same. and improve their lives or write their book or whatever it is that might help them do.
Well, and you bring a couple great points with that. Some things that I talk about in my books when I'm coaching my clients is two main areas. One is monotasking, with what you talked about, with focusing on the one thing. And the other thing is people talk about working hard or working smart, and I disagree. You need to work hard and you need to work smart. And you're talking about minimizing distractions. That's an awesome point. One thing that I do, and this is what I recommend to my clients too, is when you're actually, if you're writing your book, because I also recommend that you potentially speak out your book if you prefer that tactic. But if you are traditionally writing your book, the thing that you need to do, turn off the TV, turn off your Wi-Fi, because that way, those two things alone. And then the third thing, if you can, turn your phone to silent. Don't turn it off, but turn it to silent, put it face down, just like you should at a meal, and just focus on the task at hand. So you bring some great points with that.
Yeah, those are really great points. Yeah, totally agree with those.
Well, Kent, I'm going to bring you now to our final question, and that is, what is your favorite quote and why?
Again, that's a really good question. And I have so many great quotes that I use, but I guess the one that really comes to mind, considering the topic we're on, and considering that I just slammed Steve Jobs earlier, it would be a quote from Steve. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, but it would be, simple can be harder than complex, and you have to work hard to get your thinking to be simple, but it's worth it in the end, because once you get there, you can move mountains. And it really is so true. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean, to make it simple. I find it super easy to confuse people, as I might have done in this interview here, and to confuse myself. And that's what really drives me to developing my library of thoughts so that I can be more succinct and articulate my ideas. When I get there, even with a few thoughts, I really do see the problems in my business that used to be those looming mountains just move out of the way. And I've seen times where I've been describing something to someone and the light has gone on for them, and it's become an aha moment for them, and it's moved mountains for them. So I would say spend time poring over your thoughts, work hard at making it simple. It really is worth it in the end, putting all that effort in.
Well, and simplifying is everything. That's my philosophy as a coach, as a publisher, and as a teacher when I taught my students. It's all about simplifying and just showing frameworks, systems, and just trusting the process, and more importantly, following the process, plug and play. So you bring up some great points with that. And hey, you're actually our third Canadian on the show. So I mentioned Jason, I mentioned Scott Allen. Scott has actually kind of reverse engineered what you did. Scott's from Canada, but he actually lives in Japan. So you kind of went from Japan to Canada. It's funny how that all kind of plays in together.
Yeah, I actually know Scott from in Japan. I've read a couple of his books. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, Scott's been a partner for several years. We've worked together on projects, and just a great guy. In fact, we we're a part of the, I think it was a Self-Mastery box set recently that came out. But yeah, we've worked together and collaborated on multiple marketing launches and projects and everything. So yeah, awesome guy. And that's a nice thing. Well, and the nice thing is with doing this podcast, being part of author communities, is the fact that we get to build these relationships. I mean, how cool is it that here I am in Arlington, Texas, and I'm talking to you in Canada, and we're having this great conversation. And you mentioned, you're worried about if this is clear or not. Don't even worry about that. The whole point of this show is to have structure, but to also have a free-flowing conversation and to really talk about the writer's journey, the author's journey, because we're all going to have different perspectives and different philosophies. So I think you've done great with this.
Sweet. Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear it.
Well, Kent, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. Now, what is the best way for people to find you online?
The best way to find me online is probably by going to my business, actually, which is spear.com, and that's SPEARE.com, which is short for Shakespeare, because I've developed a thought processor that makes short work of writing.
Excellent. Well, Kent, I want to thank you again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. It was great talking with you.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.